question. Suppose, Lord Russell, this film were to be looked at by our descendants, like a Dead Sea Scroll in 1,000 years' time. What would you think it's worth telling that generation about the life you've lived and the lessons you've learned from it?
I should like to say two things. One intellectual and one moral. The intellectual thing I should want to say to them is this. When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out. Never let yourself be diverted either by what you wish to believe or by what you think would have beneficent social effects if it were believed. But look only and solely at what are the facts.
Hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, commentary on everything UAP and UFO. And holy cow, what an insane week. What an insane week. We are definitely going to dive into this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be talking about, of course, Garry Nolan's appearance on Tucker Carlson. An hour-long discussion. Yeah, we'll get into that. It's going to be pretty awesome.
Happy birthday!
Oh, thanks, Michelle. It's my birthday. Yes, rumors are true. Anyway, we continue. So we've also got Lex Fridman and Lieutenant Ryan Graves had a discussion, and I found a couple of really I'm not even sure which one was the more interesting of the two as far as discussions are concerned. I mean, I feel like everyone's going to give this Garry Nolan interview the highest praise, but I mean, go check out this Lieutenant Graves interview with Lex Fridman. It is really, really good. The CIA director over the weekend came out and basically said backed off of Havana Syndrome and what's going on with the diplomats and who it could have been and the motivations behind it. So that was an interesting development over the weekend. So we'll get into that. Before we do, of course, I want to say hello and I love you to everyone in the chat. We already got a donation from Jordan Mack who says, happy birthday, Leo. Thank you for the whole crew for making Thursday night something to look forward to. Cheers to another year. Thank you so much, Jordan Mack. Absolutely appreciate it. Rodrigo Vieira. By the way, it's Rodrigo's birthday today as well. So happy birthday right back at you, Sparky Lady. Congrats. Thank you. Everybody here. Hello, hello, hello. Aaron Desario. Oh, yeah, Aaron Desario. Thanks, man. Love you guys. All right, let's get started. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. Oh, yeah, but I forgot to tell you guys. This show's 100% free. We're really proud of that. If you want to support the show, there are links to Patreon in the description below. If you're watching this on a replay, you can tip us. There's a tip jar. So please feel free to donate whenever you want. It does help the show. Public access channel supported by viewers like you. No paywall here, so that's really fun. And want to say thank you to the moderators. Want to say thank you to the Patreon members. Want to say thank you to the YouTube members and everyone in the chat. You guys are absolutely amazing. It's been a really great birthday today. So thank you to everyone else on Twitter who shouted me out on Twitter. That was amazing. Want to let you know that we've got links for everything we're going to be talking about in the description below. We've also got links for our co-hosts, Jane, Kyle, Rather Be Squidding. How you guys doing?
Doing well.
I didn't know it was your birthday. I feel so stupid.
Oh, don't feel stupid.
Happy birthday. I wish I could
Happy
take
birthday.
you out for an actual drink or something.
One
Instead
day.
of in here with all of you losers in the chat. I'm completely kidding, guys.
No, totally.
I'm so happy to be here. No, I really am. Like all of you in the chat and you and Rather, you guys are such a breath of fresh air just after a difficult month. So I'm so happy to talk about UFOs and gossip. And
we're so happy that you're here. We're so happy that you're in the position to gossip and have fun with us. So yeah, we'll keep it light. We'll keep it fun. Rather, how you been doing?
Doing well. Yeah. Been busy just catching up on the UFO news these days, it seems like.
There was so much that happened this week. So many interviews the links that I sent you guys were just like, oh, we got to talk about this, guys. Let's check this out. Because there was so many just great moments. And then the last thing that happened was this interview with Tucker Carlson and Garry Nolan, Professor Garry Nolan, from the University of Stanford. So I guess we should probably just quickly, before we talk about this, I think it's important that we do go over just a little bit of Garry Nolan's resume. I think that's warranted before we start talking about this and start giving our opinions on this. But Garry P. Nolan is an American immunologist, academic inventor, and business executive. He holds the Ratchford at Carlota A. Harris Professor Endowed Chair in the Department of Pathology at Stanford University School of Medicine. His research interests are biology, biochemistry, symptometry, cancer, and genetics. And he's got a bunch of patents, medical patents. He's incredibly well respected in the scientific community. He's got his name on an entire building at Stanford. I was thinking about this a lot this weekend when this came out. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you guys have thoughts on it. 2 years ago, I would have absolutely freaked out about this. Freaked out. I would have
Even
been
a year ago.
cartwheels. Even a year ago. Yeah, a year ago. I'm a little more cautious this time, and I think we'll be having some discussions here, hopefully in the next week or two, about exactly why I have those concerns. But overall, I guess I'll just start with this. He was insanely confident in what he was saying. And one of the things I thought of was is, we have a hard time trusting that these lawmakers are able to decipher the information in a way where they can definitively say that there's a there. Because they're congressmen, they're not scientists, right? That's sort of the knock. For me, I'm like, well, many lawmakers and all of these lawmakers comes from different walks of life. They all have different expertise. Some of them are actually very brilliant people. But for me, that was one of these hanging points was, well, the reason why these laws are being written is because these congressmen have to be seeing in classified briefings some pretty amazing things. They have to be reading, they have to be being briefed by pilots, and I'm assuming they're seeing videos. These are all assumptions. I don't know 100%, but that's always been like sort of the thing I hang my hat on. Is like, one or two lawmakers, maybe it's not happening, but when you've got an entire committee and then you've got both sides of the floor voting and not protesting any parts of these bills that are being written or proposed, for me, that says a lot. But I also understand how people would be like, well, it's Congress. Like, they could get things wrong all the time. They do. And okay, so I'll give you that one. This is a Stanford professor, and it seems to me, and we're going to play parts of this this interview for you guys, but I want to get your thoughts first before we do. But it seems to me that he's seen maybe things that congressmen have seen. He did say the CIA came to his office and basically started giving him all this information. Wasn't very specific on a lot of this information. But I'm curious to know what you guys think. Jane, we'll start with you because I know it's rather chomping at the bit, but I want to get Jane's take first.
I thought it was a great interview. I think Garry Nolan is very credible, and also comes off as credible. Like, he doesn't and he seems to always back up any claim that's too extraordinary, so he doesn't ever really seem to quite go over the edge. So, you don't really, he keeps you with him throughout the interview. I would say, I would think the biggest, if I'm going to be critical, because I feel like people want that a little bit, I think it's just you could tell that Tucker was a fan of him. So it was just very much a pleasant conversation about some really interesting ideas, but it still was just, I don't know, not just, but there was a lot of speculation and just kind of taking his word for granted about a lot of, maybe what you're suggesting, Lou, maybe some classified evidence he's looked at and can't share with us. But I thought it was a good conversation.
We learned he briefed the senator.
Oh shoot, you froze like right when you did you catch that, rather, or was that just me?
I did. It might have been you, Jane.
Oh, it was me.
Yeah, we learned that he briefed the senator on the Wilson
Right.
Davis documents, at least. We don't know
on the
what else he
Wilson.
might have.
I somehow I must have missed that. It was a long interview, and then I also watched the Graves one too. So it was
right. You might be mixing a couple.
I might have mixed it.
It's easy,
so
because
he
they
briefed it specifically on the Wilson Davis.
Yeah,
There's
that's
a little bit of ambiguity
understanding
there, but it sounded like that.
It sounded like that. Yeah, that was my understanding. That's what I took away from
headline.
it. At the worst case, he briefed a sitting senator on a UAP hearing.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Rather, what do you think, bud?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, where if I heard this a year ago, I'd have been, wow, this is, amazing. This is, the disclosure that we're kind of looking for. With a year past now, where we've seen that a lot of the people who are preaching this have been, thinking that things are out of this world that ended up being kind of prosaic. My, standards for evidence are a little bit higher. So, I think he made a lot of good points. There was a lot of good info in there, but it was a little bit weird, I thought, because, he did say, he remains skeptical until he, sees actual evidence of something physics defying or anything like that. And he says that, the Congress has seen things that he hasn't. So I don't think that he has seen any, of these videos or any evidence that, we haven't seen. It really sounds like he's, completely bought in on kind of the whole, how Puthoff, Eric Davis, Lou Elizondo kind of story of what's happening. And it kind of seems like he's kind of believing a lot of that a little bit uncritically to me. Because, he kept on talking about, the data is real and that, there's tons of data, but we really don't have data. We have a lot of stories. We have a lot of really interesting stories that, should make scientists interested to go try to find that data. But I don't think that we're quite at the point where Garry Nolan is or I don't think we should be as kind of a society at the point where Garry Nolan personally is.
How does a Stanford professor get come to a point where he says the data is good?
He kind of says both things, doesn't he? Right? Like he says that the data is real, and that specifically we're talking about like the underwater stuff, right? He spent a whole segment saying that there's a lot of data for underwater. Then the data is real and it's great, but there isn't any data, at least not in the public sphere. And I don't think that Garry Nolan has actually seen any data that we haven't. We have some interesting stories from people, interesting anecdotes that have come out in the drive and the debrief. But, we still don't have that actual data there. And, just because you're a PhD scientist, a brilliant person, doesn't mean that all the answers of everything, right? So I think that that's a little bit of a,
No, but it is very difficult for me to believe for him. I mean, look, I think he has to have a bias in this, right? Because he did say that he's seen one. So like me, like it, when you see one of these things, it puts, you never forget it. Like he says, you never, ever, ever, ever forget it. And so there is a bias there, but I do have a hard time believing how he got from this being a joke to him believing it's real.
Do you think he ever thought it was a joke? I mean, it sounds like he had early childhood experiences, and he mentioned like a 12-year-old having an experience.
Well, I guess not a joke,
craft.
but not, I guess not studying it or being a champion of it. Like he's put a public face to this recently. But Jay, what were you gonna say?
Well, I mean, I wonder if it was the CIA visit. I mean, I think there's that. What effect does that have on you when you have other credible people suggesting incredible things that you maybe were thinking too? And like I don't know. I mean, I don't know because I don't remember if he talked about that in the interview. I clearly missed the Wilson memo headline there, but. Yeah, just in general about the data, though, I guess the data are the medical records. So they saw a UFO, and then there was some change to there was evidence of brain injury or something like that. And so that data may be really compelling, but unless like people can look at it, right, or it's peer reviewed, or other people with PhDs can look at it, and maybe they have, I don't know, right? Like maybe it's classified. It's my question, and I question this. I'm kind of boring. I like to read abstracts and studies and stuff, and so my question would be, okay, so people saw UFO, and then there was evidence, of brain injury. Would be, is there anything else about the environment or the person or the factors that could have contributed to that? Because unfortunately I've had to research a lot about brain tumors in my life on behalf of other people, and they're finding that some of them actually could be resulting from, or at least you could have an increased risk due to radiation exposure, even specifically radiotherapy. So children that had radiation therapy for certain sicknesses and stuff had increased risk for brain tumors. So there very well could be something that Garry Nolan is seeing, that the doctors are proving. But is it aliens? We would definitely, I think it's fair to ask to see that data in order to jump on board, right?
Well, yeah, and I think that you're probably right that it is the CIA data and those medical stuff is the data that Garry Nolan kind of has seen that we haven't seen, and he did kind of mention that too. That it seems like these people who had UFO encounters all had brain damage and effects that were consistent with radiation exposure, just like you're saying. And
let's I've got the clip. You want me to pull it up?
Sure.
Yeah, let me pull it up, because I mean we've got his words right here. So if we can get it right, let's get it right. Give me 2 seconds here. All right, here we go.
Talking about it. Yep.
And I actually briefly briefed Congressman Gallagher about this issue before he did the congressional hearings on it about the Wilson Davis memo.
There you go.
And these people are taking it seriously, and you have to.
Amazing. So tell us about the injuries. So again, you've seen 100 cases. What kinds of injuries do people sustain?
I think the most dramatic are because we have MRIs, the things that you see within the body. And so what we had done was, in looking at some of these MRIs, we had noticed damage in the brain, white matter disease, it's called. If you know anybody, for instance, who's had multiple sclerosis, and you look at an image of their brain, you'll see these white matter objects. Oh yeah, you can see it there. Those white tracts there are just damage to the brain, right? Those are dead areas of the brain. And so if you have that dead area of the brain, whatever that function might have been is now gone, right? So memory, movement, et cetera, can all be affected. Now the brain can luckily rewire some things. And so depending upon the extent of the damage, you can maybe get over it. But the ones that you just saw on that image before on the right, those are serious. And that was what essentially convinced me. But what I asked for of these people, I said, look, I'm not just going to believe you because you showed me images of these people. I want to meet the people. And so I was taken to meet the people and interview them. And I took their blood for later analysis. So, it was seeing is believing, and validation and verification. I did as much as I reasonably can. Now, they could be lying to me. I don't know, but I doubt it, because I saw some of the sort of the consequences of their injuries, that you could sort of see how they were acting, et cetera.
And did they describe?
I mean, right there, he definitely says that that's what he briefed the congressman on. But also that he had, now I want to go back real quick to the image of this brain scan, because I'm not sure if you guys caught this, and I said it in the spaces a couple of days ago, because I don't mind doing things like this. But shout out to Sean Rash. He caught this. I thought it was a pretty good catch on his part. This image of the brain scans in the top right corner here says CEO/executive I'm assuming DOE Advanced Propulsion Gravity Research Threat post PRC visit. I don't know what post PRC visit is, PRC, what that acronym is, but I found it Department of Energy Advanced Propulsion Gravity Research is what caused this injury, is what I'm gathering from that. Is that what you guys are getting? What do you think? I mean, what are your initial thoughts on that?
Who put that graphic together and why that's there, right?
That's true.
I mean, it was Jim Semivan, apparently, of the CIA, who visited Garry Nolan and kind of, gave him this stuff. And Garry Nolan said in conjunction with an aerospace company. So it's unclear why the DOE would have their name attached to that. But
well,
who knows?
I could tell you this. And I suggest people go check this out. Go listen to the interview with Chris Bartell and Ryan Sprague. And by the way, Chris Bartell and Carl are going to be on the show next Thursday. We're going to spend the whole 2 hours with them. We're going to dig into this image, hopefully, and some other things. But yeah, we'll get there. I've been having conversations setting up this interview, and I'm excited to talk to him because he, in that interview, said, it was asked if there was any chance that you were on that ranch as an experiment, as like a guinea pig for them to test things. And he's really contemplated that question heavily for a long, long time. And he doesn't know, obviously, 100% for sure if that's the case. But if he sustained injuries similar to this coming off that ranch, I can tell you he's not happy about it, if that's true.
That's kind of one of the conspiracies that I kind of jumped at after hearing Garry Nolan talk about these injuries and the radiation is, especially like the Rendlesham guy who, had his medical records classified and, couldn't get any help from the VA and stuff. If potentially the United States government is exposing service people to radiation, either intentionally or even by accident, it would almost make sense that they would want to play up any potential UFO encounters to be like, hey, it was the aliens who did this to you, not us. Don't come trying to blame us.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting theory.
Yeah, I call it the Cash Landrum conundrum, which is, because I like to think of that 80s case where you had, two women, actually, I guess 3 witnesses close, up close, to UFO. And, I know probably a lot of you guys know what we're talking about, but had, essentially effects of radiation is what they presumed. And they tried to sue the government, lost the case, et cetera. But it's like there's either two situations, right? It's either our own or enemy craft, right? That somehow is in civilian airspace. In this case, this wasn't even military. Not that that's okay either, but this is just, a person just driving down the road, or it's aliens and either way, we didn't watch out for the person who sustained the injuries. So I think Garry Nolan, he talked about in the interview how, like, we can't change the past. Let's not go and like ask for money. Let's not try to necessarily make this right, I guess, or let it go. But I don't know what the right approach is there. But yeah, I think that's why just Roswell and all those old cases just never really go away, because you have all of these people that are just like in the wake of this cover up. Like, whether you think the aliens are real or not, the cover up it's clearly had human cost, right? Where science has been blocked, many more doctors could have been on this for many more years if we were more transparent about these things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great point.
No, I mean, they mentioned it at the beginning of the interview that it seems like the secrecy on this is crumbling, right? And for me, look, I think this is, whether we want to admit it or not, I feel like this interview was a watershed moment in a lot of ways. For the UFO nerds in the discussion, we're going to dice this conversation a million different ways, and what he said and how he said it. Oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? And we're going to go crazy eating ourselves alive over this interview. I just, for me, it's very powerful. This interview, like, it's a powerful interview. Like, this is a man of status. Like, when he talks about, like, what are your colleagues saying on Stanford? Really don't give a shit. Like, they know my reputation. They know what I've done. They know the research I've done and the patents that I've made and the money that I've brought to the university. And I don't care. Like, I don't care. I have the professional bona fides. And I've also been known for going against the grain. This is definitely against the grain. And he said going against the grain has paid off for him in the past. And it has. But even with that said, I'm still skeptical as hell. Like, there's still parts of this we're going to dissect more next week. Because I think there's some of the data that was put on this. A lot of it, first of all, was inconclusive or bad videos, like the things we always complain about. Like, they always put on the worst videos and sort of the, as graphics in the background, and so they did the same thing with this, but more specifically, sort of where this data that Gary's looking at, where some of it might have come from. And yeah, I mean, we'll see. Anyway, there was another part here where he talks about, this is when I think of US tech, this story kind of reminds me of something that we've talked about on this show, which is sort of a holographic display that can be seen on radar, and from a certain angle, it looks like something, pretty crazy, or whatever it's displaying. But from other angles, you wouldn't be able to see it. And so I thought this was an interesting clip of Garry explaining something that a French family saw. And he said this happened very recently. So I'm curious to know if we're ever going to see the data on this. But let's check it out.
The memory, I don't know. I mean, here's an example. There's a great case. It's in France. This family, this is just within the last few years, driving down the highway, a mother and two children in the back. They have an open top car during the day, a crowded highway. They see over their head through the window a craft. I mean, it's just obvious, and then she's looking around. The mother's looking around and saying, and noticing that nobody else seems to see this. Okay, so the kids in the back have a camera, a phone, take a picture. When they get home, they take a look at the picture. There's not a craft, but there's an object, a small sort of star-shaped object about 30 or 40 feet over their car. So let's say that's the object, but it projected an image of something else, and yet that's all they saw. So what happened? It's sort of like it was a projected 3D image of something, but it was only seen by them. So when you start to hear many of these cases, and Jacques Vallée talks about this a lot, that whatever these things are, seem to have the ability to project altered reality into people's minds. I know that sounds crazy. And I'm just repeating the stories.
Well, no
and the
crazier
ways to
than
think.
any other thing that we've been talking about.
Right.
I mean, it's all outside the bounds of what we understand as science anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I have the picture of that they took of that star-shaped object and the story. And Jacques had been the person who went and did the interviews for it. And
you're muted, Mike.
Yeah, I see. That's a pretty wild story.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen this is the picture apparently of that was taken by the family.
Oh, okay. No, I have not seen that. Can you zoom in on that a little?
I will try to,
if you can. It looks like it's on Twitter.
Yeah, it's not really zooming in much.
Send me the Twitter link. Maybe I can do it on my end. That's interesting.
But yeah, it's an interesting story, but I think this is kind of where Garry Nolan's biases really kind of show, right? In other part of the interview, he talks about how having an experience like this changes your life and how he wants to protect the experiencers and wants to kind of advocate for them. And he sounds like he kind of does that a little bit uncritically because he doesn't want to tell anyone they're wrong, kind of thing. And on this, it seems like jumping to a hologram projected to explain what they're seeing really seems like that's jumping over a number of potential prosaic explanations, right? Even as simple as just that whatever was in the sky might have been 100 feet lower and looked more interesting close up, So I was a little bit. I feel like he might kind of overstep the bounds of common sense with some of that story.
Rather, you're tough today, man.
Well, particularly too, talking about Jacques Vallée, there's another thing that Mick West posted about Jacques Vallée, which I think is kind of, gets on the same point, which is, I've
got the picture. I've got the picture right here. Let me zoom in so people can see what this thing looks like. But yeah, it looks like a star. I mean, I saw that you pulled this from Mick West's website. What is Mick's? Hold on. I'm sorry to cut you off, Jane. What does Mick West think this is?
I have an idea of what he might think it is.
He's just he asked for a better version of the photo and asked if anyone has any idea.
Let's all guess.
What do you think, Jane? Go for it.
I mean, if I only saw the photo, I would think a balloon. Like if that was all that I saw, that's probably what I would think. Because there's a lot of star-shaped, balloons.
I'm with you there. But
obviously the story matters and the testimony matters. And
right.
I will say witness testimony is frustratingly, the more incredible and detailed and amazing the testimony is, the photo and video evidence just doesn't match up. And this is something we see time and time again. And that doesn't mean that witnesses are lying. I think it does mean, though, that if aliens are real and are advanced and are visiting, they could be doing things like what Garry Nolan is suggesting, like with the projections, especially the abduction phenomenon is so hard. Nobody ever gets a photo of the gray, right? So that they could be some kind of avatar, where they, and do some hypnosis or sleep paralysis or something like that. But yeah, I mean, we don't have the ladder yet in science to get from that photo to what I just said or what Garry Nolan was suggesting. We just don't have it yet.
Yeah, I agree. I would say maybe it kind of looks potentially like a drone, but yeah, who really knows? If it is a hologram that they're projecting to fool these, this family in France, I mean, maybe, but why, right? Like it doesn't make a lot of
I mean, just to test it to see again, like why fly the B-2 bomber over major cities before you unveil it, you know, to get a reaction, to see what that reaction is. It's just data collection. It's just testing it. It's just being like, hey, let's pretend this car doesn't matter. They don't even give thought of who's inside. They're just like, let's just run a simulation for right now. This car is a foreign diplomat that we want to scare the hell out of on a curvy road. You know, and then boom, holograph pops up, and all of a sudden you got a nice, neat little wrapped up guy drove off the cliff story, you know, and you know, foreign adversary taken care of. I don't know. I have a hard time believing this holographic imaging technology. In my brain, it just feels like there would have to be so many moving parts to make that work.
Well, it's not only is it holographic, but it's, you know, projected. It's because no one else saw it, right?
Yeah. Well, nobody else saw it. Well, that's why I thought of technology, right? Because nobody else was able to see it. And I feel like I have seen pictures of holograms, and sometimes if the camera angle's right, you don't even see the hologram. You just kind of see the crystals or the point of the laser that's displaying it. So that's kind of what I was like interested to see with the picture. Now that I've seen the picture, I'm like, well, maybe that's what that is, possibly. And that could explain maybe why they didn't see that, you know. But when they took, I mean, the thing I found interesting about the story is the kids waited till they got home to look at the iPhones. I'm assuming they're iPhones, they're kids, but you know, like I'd be looking at the pictures right then and there, like, or, you know, making sure you got it or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's the only story where I was like, oh man, I don't know about this one. I don't know. Like, I don't know. This one feels weird, but then again, if let's say, and this shouldn't matter, right? It doesn't matter who's in the car, but let's just say it was someone of social status or importance, whatever, put whatever title you want on that, you know, and then they came out public and they were like, hey, this is what me and my family saw. Like, I'm putting my kids on camera, you know, like, would that change our opinion of it maybe a little bit?
Maybe. I feel like it's still, you know, it's still just a story, right? Until you have that actual, you know, evidence of whatever it appears. And yeah, I don't know. You know, the mind can really play tricks on you too. You know, it's really hard to say that something you experienced is, you know, de facto reality. It is very, you know, very nebulous.
Yeah.
I mean, think I would be perplexed. I don't know if I would have any fancy theories that I would be confident about in saying extraterrestrial, but I think I would be very perplexed. I'd be like, and curious, as I mean, that's what has been going on, is you get these really rich, credible, believable testimonies. I don't think people are lying, but then you don't have the nuts and bolts evidence that backs it up, just plain and simple. And so you just kind of keep going in circles. And so the best thing you can do is try to deduce. And so you just gather as much testimony. So it's like, okay, that's a pretty unusual photo, but let's say that was your typical orb photo. Well, we need to match up all the orb photos with all those testimonies, compare that with all the triangle photos, all those testimonies, start separating out the less credible, the cases without entity encounters, or that, you know, have XYZ. And I try to do that. I'm trying to do that. Most of it's just kind of behind the scenes right now, and I'm working on it. But that's just what we have right now. We're just piecing it together. And I don't know if Garry Nolan's been briefed by a team or been part of some team he can't talk to us about, where they've done a lot of this already. And I think that, yeah, I would want to learn more, you know, I'm actually surprised at Mick's being reasonable on that one. That would be truly what I would, you know, I'd probably just try to see if what I always go to is, well, did anybody else see this in this town?
Well, no, I mean, no, they said they were on a highway traveling at high speeds. And so when mom looked around to see if anybody else was seeing this, everybody was like, you know, doing their thing, just driving along. But maybe you have, I mean, again, also, like when I think of traffic, most times when I'm in traffic, and boy, do I know a thing or two about traffic. Most cars are filled with only one person. So they're concentrating on what they're doing. They might not be looking up through their sunroof. And I also had thought this has to be like a well-to-do family if they had a full sunroof in their car.
Right.
Right? Like I'm thinking Mercedes-Benz or something like that, where they all looking up,
Are
they
they
taking
convertible?
pictures through this huge glass dome that they've got on their, Tesla or whatever it is they're driving, because not a lot of cars
Those
have a
Tesla
full
glass
roof.
domes are
Yeah,
cool.
they're
Those are
cool.
Those
They're
are-
cool as hell. Okay, so there's a couple other clips I want to play. This is from early in the interview, and you'll see the question from Tucker, and then we'll talk about it. But actually, real quick, you did have something you wanted to pull up, right? Rather, it was this.
Well, so this is, the kind of, getting at, I think that, Garry Nolan and the kind of the crew he's associated with, Jack Valet and, Lou Elizondo and, Kit Green, all these people, they really seem to be really wanting to push the non-prosaic explanations over prosaic explanations. And I think this is a, great example. And this is also from Mick West Twitter, but this is from a slide, Jack Valet. There was a Contact in the Desert talk that he did that was recently posted online. And he had a big segment about these patterns that are, sometimes appear on people, mostly women, sometimes men. They, disappear after a week or two, don't have any negative health effects. And, so Mick came up with, this slide, which is a burn mark from a hairdryer. And it looks very, very, very similar to the, diagrams you have over here. And Jack Valet was actually even asked on the in the Q&A section of that video, did you consider
those all
hair
look like
dryers?
hair dryers now?
Yeah. I mean, they
damn
really
it! Why
do,
did
right?
you do that? Oh my god, the
and-
radio audience has got to be so confused. But yeah, please check it out on Twitter.
Yeah, they're like
the-
circles with like a grid pattern on them, pretty much, that are about the size.
They all
of a
look like
hairdryer.
you know what it looks like? It looks like if you've ever played like a first-person shooter and you get to pick out your rectangle.
Crosshair.
Your
Yeah.
crosshair, like that. It looks like a list of crosshairs that you could use in a video.
Or like a sailboat wheel or something.
Yeah, or a sailboat wheel. Yeah, that's a good one too, Jane.
I
Different
can't
sailboat
ride
wheels
this
that you can get for
hair,
your yacht.
It would be ridiculous. I'd maybe for Halloween, if I want to be like a character. So I can't relate to the hair dryer burns, unfortunately. I wonder if some women in the chat can, or you guys are just sexist.
But here's the thing though, and this is kind of something that I think Nolan echoed, and so did Weinstein, and that is that, man, we have to have a little bit more room to let people tell these stories and let it breathe out, as crazy as they may sound to a lot of us. But I mean, you make a wonderful point. I think those, I can't unsee that now. If I ever see a burn mark like that on somebody, I'd be like, okay, what'd you do with your dryer, buddy? Let me go see your dryer. You know what I'm saying? Like I and that's kind of what Mick is really guilty of. If that's his one fault, is sort of that he has a pre-conclusion of what this is or what it's not. I think I really do. Like I think he does not. It's 0.01% of the non-human possibility in his thinking.
Well, I mean, he made a great point, and when he in the discussion about this, he says that the main errors that Jacques Vallée did, that they do a lot in this area, is that they throw away prosaic explanations or throw away possible explanations too fast. And I think he even clarifies that he doesn't throw away the non-prosaic explanations. He still takes those as possible, but he just doesn't jump to them first. So they throw away the hairdryer explanation. They toss that out of hand without even looking into it. And then they don't crowdsource it. They're just the same people looking at it. And if you don't have that other evidence in your repertoire, in your mind, you're never going to put those two together. So I think that you need to kind of open.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think it's just, how do we ask for that information without, and at the same time being sensitive to the people who are providing the data, right? Like, because I mean, the first question now, after I see a graph like that, if anybody ever for the rest of time ever shows me a mark like that on their skin, I'm gonna be like, do you have a blow dryer? Can I check it out?
But look, if you want to get insurance for something, right? Like you have to prove that you went to the doctor, and let's say, you're getting insurance for like a medical issue that's very sensitive and serious. If you're asking people to entertain the idea that aliens are visiting, or that something is very different than, what, we've been taught thus far or whatever, I think I think at this point in the game, people have to start expecting questions like, where is the data? They have to start being okay with entertaining non-prosaic ideas, because that's how you get to the prosaic, or entertaining prosaic ideas, because that's how you get to the non-prosaic ones. That's really the only way you get there when you don't have the science yet. People say we don't have the science yet to prove portals and stuff. Well, it's like, that's why you get rid of all the stuff that you can explain, so you're just left over. I think there's doctors that have good bedside manner and doctors that don't, and scientists that do, and I think we should all continue to be nice people. But I also think, if you're a witness, and you're coming forward and you are asking for attention, right, for your testimony, and you're submitting it as evidence for something as paradigm shifting, as incredible as alien visitation, that would affect the course of science and medicine and education and potentially change the world, that's a huge responsibility you're taking on. That's a huge power that you have. And I think maybe in the past, witnesses didn't have that power, but I think now they do. So I think there is some responsibility, I think, for that.
No, that's a beautiful point. That's a beautiful point, Jane. What were you going to add to that, rather?
Yeah, I mean, I think that skeptics should be free to offer suggestions on what they think might happen without, that being a, negative thing, or seeing as like being a bully. I think that there's definitely a line. You don't want to ridicule these people. It's totally all right to be wrong. Right. But I think also on the other end of the spectrum, experiencers, people who have these reports, there's a tendency to say, I saw what I saw, and that's it, right? I think that they need to be open to the possibility that they might have misinterpreted something, and what they perceived to happen might be open to some interpretation, and that's okay. That's no fault of theirs, and that shouldn't be anything to be ashamed of.
No, but I gotta tell you, just speaking from an experiencer's point of view, that takes a long time to get to. It takes a long time to see something like this, and then having to backtrack and go, well, maybe my brain doesn't work, or maybe my memory of it is like, it's so irrationally stupid to even like, I'm getting angry thinking about it, like this idea that I got it wrong and 15 or 20 other people got it wrong. We all looked at it and said, oh my God, what the F is that? And we all ran at it and screamed, and we're afraid, and we're joyous, and we're freaking out. Like, that was surreal. That was visceral, right? And that has an implant on somebody. And, it's just real easy for anybody to come in here and be like, well, buddy, it's just a story. Like, screw you. I mean, and it's hard to get from that viewpoint that I just displayed to, hey man, maybe I did misinterpret what I saw. Maybe so did 15 or 20 other people. It's happened before. I mean, we have the perfect example of this. It just happened right before the pandemic, with that Goodyear blimp over Monday Night Football, when everybody was in the house for a year and then saw a blimp for the first time in a year over a Monday Night Football game, and the entire New Jersey Turnpike stopped and started taking videos of a blimp that at a certain angle looked like a massive triangle. So I get that, but at the same time, like I think people like Mick West, people that are starting, stodge sort of skeptics of this, should really chill out and consider that viewpoint that I just laid out there, that experience. Like, it is visceral, and I can, as a reasonable person, can say it's not insulting when you question it. I totally get it now. Like, I absolutely 100% understand your viewpoint. Like, you weren't there, first of all. That's number one, right? So I can't, no combination of words is ever going to express exactly what went down that night. You have to, it's tough, man. It's really tough for people who've had, and then I can't even imagine people who've had even closer encounters than that, or even more visceral experiences than that. And then, coming in here and being like, can I see your blow dryer? Like, how insulting is that? Like, that's the first question out of your mouth. Can I check out your blow dryer? Before we get anywhere else, let me check out the blow dryer. But I could understand, going, okay, I understand why you're asking for the blow dryer, but at the same time, like, can we ask a couple more questions before we get to the blow dryer one? Or at least, put
it's
yourself
like
in their
in
shoes for a second.
Ghostbusters when they're
Yeah,
like menstruating.
Right.
It's not, they're like, why do you want to know that?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, you understand what I'm saying,
Did
right?
you guys have you guys seen The Right Stuff?
Yeah.
I hadn't, and I was watching it kind of in the background the other day, and the scene where John Glenn is in the the rocket ship, and he sees all the fireflies around him, and he's like, they're beautiful, and they could I don't know if they're alive, and I guess we find out later that it was sparks from, and I guess he was in danger. And well, what's interesting, I mean, look, there's two sides of this, because John Glenn is also one of the leading, or was, one of the leading disclosure advocates. And, maybe it was Firefly, maybe it wasn't fire, or whatever. But that was like a very visceral experience in that movie. And I'm sure it was for him. And then there ended up being a pretty mundane explanation, or, so they say, right? Kind of similar like with Phoenix Lights. Like everybody, I still hear people parroting that they were just flares. But when you hear, people talk about that big ship flying over them and how they couldn't even talk and how they were frozen, and, some people, it's like the experience was just wiped from their mind and stuff. So, I mean, I don't know what point I'm really proving, but I guess it's like, you have cases that, remain undebunked, in my opinion, like Phoenix Lights. And then you have, a case where an astronaut thought, that he was seeing multiple, small lights or living creatures, right? And it turned out to be, sparks from, his own ship, right? So, yeah, I mean, how do you go about that in a sensitive way? Even in that movie, I don't know how it went in real life. They, the people in the what's the NASA version of the cockpit, essentially, they didn't want to tell him what was happening. I maybe because he was in danger, or maybe there was a little bit of not wanting to burst his bubble because he was having this just like wonderful experience. So yeah, I don't know the right answers, but I know that we have to not be afraid of the mundane explanations, right, and of the truth, because we'll just never get anywhere if we're just walking on tiptoes. That's not science. There's no walking on, tiptoes and eggshells in science. You're just kind of doing it, right?
Yeah.
I agree with you. And kind of to both those points, I think that, it is disrespectful to, challenge someone's belief directly, right? Like, but I don't think, that's what like people like Mick West are doing. They're challenging, data that's being presented as, this is proof for UFOs. They're not, going and trying to go to everyone's, experience or tale and say, hey, you're wrong, like, no.
Yeah, no.
Some people are doing that, and they should be recommended. But I think that Mick gets a lot of hate because people kind of assume that he's doing that when in fact he's not.
No, I understand. He's not on the offensive, right? But sometimes he'll get snarky comments and he'll give them right back. Or sometimes, I mean, look, he did it to me, right? Like he laughed right in my face. The first time talking to him, and I'm like, "Are you laughing at me?" Like I called him out on it, He's like, "No." I'm like, "Come on, man! Like you can't do that, right?" Like I understand. I'm not as smart as you. I get it, right? Like I get it. But I still have questions, and the way you're coming off is disrespectful. And again, resting Mick face, like we've talked about that he has done that, and that's why I think he gets the bad rep, because I think people are losing him in translation on Twitter for sure. That is 100% what's going on, because when you talk to him, and even when you call him out on it, he still has a good sense of humor about it. You can come to an understanding about it. And he even confesses to you, hey, I'm so, like, I do that sometimes. Like he's aware of it, So I don't think he doesn't do it to harm people. He doesn't punch down. He doesn't call people out. But he does ask questions of people. He does ask very difficult questions of people. And a lot of times, sometimes they answer and sometimes they don't. And it's a thread that usually goes on for, could be a book, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, getting back to Garry Nolan's interview and him saying that, he wants to, convince people that the data is real, and he wants scientists and people to, look into this seriously. I mean, I think that what Mick West is doing is exactly that. He's taking this stuff seriously, way more seriously than most people take it. And I think that you need to respect that. And even if he comes up with conclusions that you don't necessarily like. Well, and I think you're doing that. I'm mostly talking about, Garry Nolan and his problem with Mick West.
No, well, and it's weird. We're gonna get to a couple comments here that you guys, some of your super chats. So give me a second, guys. We'll talk about this a little past the hour, but we're gonna try and get to the other stories. But this is such an interesting conversation because it sparks a lot of different things that we need to think and talk about.
You know where I think I kind of got Mick West when I got to talk to him recently, which people were like expecting this like fight and it to be like really frustrating or something. And I always have fun talking to Mick. Yeah. But one thing I couldn't get him to admit is that any of the UFOs that have come across his desk are government craft. And I'm like, well, how is that even possible? Like, we know that there's, X amount of government craft out there and that they test their systems. We're talking about military leaks lately, and he couldn't even admit that. And I'm like, well, then how are you missing that? Right. And he seems a little stumped on that one. But I think that shows somehow how he can be a little bit up too. It's like, I think you have to at least concede that, especially some of the really great historic cases had to do like with at least advanced military craft
at the very least. At the very least. Minimal. Mostly Space says maybe the DOE department listed on the slide was just the studying of the injuries instead of being the cause. If they were responsible, their name probably would be there. What do you guys think of that?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems more likely that they'd be the people causing the Department of Energy. Seems like they would be the people causing radiation sicknesses, but I doubt that they would advertise that they are the people responsible, right?
Yeah. Once you pointed that out, I was like, oh yeah, this is a picture of a picture, I think, and maybe they could have added whatever they wanted to on there. But it is interesting. That's what they added. That this is, I mean, the idea of the Department of Defense playing with gravitational.
The DOE, I think that they are doing that. I mean,
yeah,
definitely.
Well, clearly,
they're investigating it. Yeah.
I mean, I guess we'll see in the next new aircraft carrier. I have no idea. Let's play this other clip here because I thought this was interesting, and this is sort of like Gary's, I guess, belief of this. He explains. Tucker asks him why the DoD is covering this up. And his answer to this I thought was really interesting. So let me pop this up for you guys here real quick. Boy, oh boy. There we go. All right.
Inside your lane, but since you've had so much experience dealing with all the people involved, maybe you have a theory. Why do you think DOD or the U.S. government more broadly has lied about this for so long?
So, I think that they were just afraid of admitting that they don't have control over the airspace. Yeah. That's one thing. But also, it's really back to what it is that I was saying before. We have the data, but we have, to the extent that there is proof that there's something else here.
When he says we have the data, I'm sorry to stop that there, but I feel like they should change that to I have the data, because or be a little more specific. Or who is we, right? Because the data that the public has so far, in a way, has been inconclusive. Is that fair?
I would agree with that.
I don't think anybody, like, that's what Jeremy Corbell points to this a lot. He's like, we have the scientific proof. We have the data is there. It's like, where, with all due respect, where, what scientific paper, what journal, what was built, what was worked on, like what is this other than a story?
And I think it's what the little nuance that makes it really confusing is that I think we have data that there are UFOs, right? I mean, we know that as a fact that
I think
the
so.
military can't identify things in the sky. We
Yeah.
don't have the data that they're, defying physics or are, indicative of non-human intelligence.
Well, we don't have the data. All we have is eyewitness testimony of the best pilots on the planet. And to me, that is data. That is data. It's just not, it's not cooperative with other facts that we could pin together with it to definitively say, okay, yes, there was a craft at sea level. It went to 80,000 feet in the sky above this radar's capability. Here are the charts. Here's the radar graphs. Here's the other instruments that picked it up. Here's the longer version of the video, yada, 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 yada.
Definitely enough data to start looking into it and try to nail it down. But yeah, I totally agree with you. We don't have that conclusive data yet.
Yeah.
The data is not ubiquitous enough and easy to find as we know that, at least, because we know that the cover up, if we know that we know that UFOs are real, we know that they were our national security threat, we know that they've been covered up, there've been active misinformation, disinformation. So a lot of people like to throw out like Occam's razor, like the simplest explanation is the right one, but that presumes you have all the data. So the problem is we have not had all the data, we still don't have all the data, and it's not out there enough to, the cover up was successful, I guess, in keeping it,
Jane,
under.
Do you think Dr. Nolan has been privy to more data than we have been?
Well, Tucker didn't really ask him that. Like, that's the thing. It's like, it was a good, like, I thought it was a fun conversation. It was stimulating. I mean, I love Coast to Coast AM and all of that, but I think just at this point in the game, like, we have to get a little more critical, because now it's not just ghost stories around a campfire anymore. Like, if you're wanting that, I would just maybe go into the ghost realm right now and leave UAP land, though eventually it'll probably all come together. I mean, kind of, especially at Skinwalker Ranch, right? It just kind of all blends together.
Man.
But yeah, but Tucker didn't really ask him that, so I don't know. Has anybody asked him that? Does he have some NDAs or something?
Well, he did. There's some Twitter threads where someone was like kind of disparaging of Nolan, saying, "Oh, there's a lot of words but no data," and Garry Nolan responded and specifically talked about the data on the brains, as that's kind of the data that he is privy to and he's presented. So my reading of that kind of exchange was that he hasn't seen any of this other video data or anything. He's seen data. This medical data is what he's privy to.
He said people were killed.
That's right.
Or died of the injuries. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like people,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what got his attention. Man, it's just like I feel like I would love 15 more Garry Nolans, right? And he's the first one to put his credibility on the line like this. I mean, not the first. That's not fair, because we've got Avi Loeb, and a few just other academics, Weinstein, Lex Fridman, Kurt Jaimungal. All of these guys are putting their credibility on the line in ways when they talk about this. But I feel like that's gone. People, I think Nolan's right. Science now has the permission to talk about this, and they're going to get grants. And he's talking about, he mentioned in this interview as well, researchers, boots on the ground researchers are going to start getting grants for this, to look at this, so they can get data from everywhere. So I don't know what that means. How qualified, what instruments you're going to need. Like, is there a bar, like a standard of stuff that you need before you're able to submit data? It's going to be interesting. But the idea that money's coming in because, and this is a great transition to the Lieutenant Graves interview. There's going to be technologies coming here in the next century that are groundbreaking, physics defying, or at least that's what they're going to look like. New physics. And Lieutenant Graves said that in this interview. But here I wanted to get to one other thing that Garry Nolan said in this interview, and then we'll transition to that, I swear. But this was the part of the interview where Tucker asked him sort of what the general consensus from the people that he's discussing this with as to what this could be. So I thought this was a really interesting moment. So let's check this out.
Convince people that the data is real.
Wait, let's move back just one sentence.
Yeah.
So without putting your professional credibility, reputation on the line, et cetera, you're around people who study this stuff for a living, who are
Right.
the most knowledgeable people on this topic in the
Yes.
world.
Yes.
What is their general sense of what this might be?
That this is not from Earth.
Right. That it's not from Earth, that this
Right.
is these are aliens, essentially.
And, you know, until I see a piece of technology that does something I don't understand, or until I see an alien body, I'm going to also remain skeptical.
Of course, as you should.
But it doesn't mean I won't study it. And people say, well, why, if you are so skeptical still, you're studying it? Because it's the most important thing that could have ever
Of course, but that's why we cover it on the show. Not because I have no special knowledge. I know nothing really, but
why could
by definition.
Yeah.
He sure doesn't seem very skeptical in the rest of the interview, does he?
No, I can't say he does. It seems like he's got a bias, but I mean, look, rather, do you really think this guy is saying this stuff off of the same information all of us have here in this conversation?
I do, and you know, I think a year ago I would have totally agreed with him on all this stuff because I believed all the reports coming out of, you know, TTSA and Lou Elizondo and everything. You know, now I'm taking those with a grain of salt because I've seen that they've been mistaken about things. So you know, I think I was probably right with Garry Nolan a year ago, but and when he talks about the people that he's working with, I'm pretty sure he's talking about Lou Elizondo and Jacques Vallée.
He mentioned Lou, he mentioned Jacques, he mentioned Chris,
you know, it's not
Chris
the people that are leading these, you know, the Moultrie and Bray at the you know, congressional hearing, people who are actually in charge of this. I don't think that they're convinced.
You don't?
Well,
no.
Jane, what were you gonna say?
Well, it kind of makes me think of Jeremy Corbell's little message to us all to weaponize our curiosity. Because what does it mean for all of our curiosity to be weaponized? What does it mean for UFOs and UAP to be a political topic with taxpayer funds? I don't think it's so much that I necessarily like distrust witnesses or even Lou Elizondo's take on this or what he's briefed on or wasn't, but it's just, what does it mean when you take this topic and you put all of this attention on it? It's just it's inevitably going to be under, like, it's like what even Garry Nolan was talking about. He was like, even any evidence of UFOs or whatever, no doubt we're going to keep it secret, right? Because we don't want the people in China to know about, the secrets, right? But we want Lockheed Martin to share whatever. I don't know. I just I don't know how to get past that wall that, Garry does talk about, in this interview. I don't know how to get past that wall. I don't know. I think it's going to have to be like a mass sighting or something. Like, I think the phenomenon itself is just going to have to reveal itself. And it will have to be out of the hands, I think. But I do think the build up, like Big Phone Home 3 and everything we're doing around it is going to shape the outcome of a mass sighting event, for example, right? So like what people are educated on going into these interviews that we're listening to with, eyes wide open and not just taking everything for granted. And just because of somebody with the PhD says that there's data that proves that there's, extraterrestrial craft, or, somebody writes a paper about ultra terrestrials or whatever. Yeah, it doesn't mean that any of that's real. Like, it may not be real. Like, we talk about like portals and portals and portals. It's like we don't even know if they're real yet. And like I want them to be, like I want to believe, and I'm excited about the idea, but this is it's getting real, guys, right?
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, I think it was a cool moment. It was a cool moment, but I'm tempering my expectations because I think that I want to see what data this is. I want to know where it's coming from. Because I think that matters, right? Like the data that he's referring to, and even the research. Like, I'd love to see, access to the research that he's done, or maybe a presentation from him. Maybe there is a presentation from him on these brain scans. I could be wrong. Maybe I haven't seen it. But the one thing I kind of called Garry out on his BS, and it's the only moment where I was like, I don't know if I believe you on this one, Mr. Nolan. And that is that I believe it is true. And this is something I said a year ago for the first big phone home, was this is a bipartisan issue. This is an issue that's getting voted on both sides of the aisle. This is an issue that committees are coming together on. They're not fighting this when the bills are being, it is 100% bipartisan. And in these very divisive times in American history, it's the only thing we could come together on. Genuinely. Like, that's not even a joke. That is for real. So the idea that this is bipartisan, you should be able to reach out. And it was the reason he said he was on Tucker was because, hey, look, I don't disagree with everything that you say. But if I can't talk to you about this important issue, then we're lost. Like, just it's over. And I agree with that. Like, you should be able to this conversation, and of course he hearkened the old Reagan and Gorbachev meetings in the UN, how Reagan had proposed this idea if we were being attacked by another civilization, all of these lines would disappear overnight. That we would all be, it would be a one race, one flag, us against them type mentality. Come talk to us, Garry. Come talk to us, man. Like, we'd love to have you. Like, Garry Nolan has been part of two conversations now that I think have been incredible to listen to. And that's the Lex Fridman discussion that he had. And that is this discussion he had with Tucker Carlson. I thought this was this kind of interview format, which is what I wish this wasn't an app that this interview went on. I wish this was the actual network, Fox News, and I wish this was an hour long.
Fox News?
I believe it was on the Tucker Carlson, on the Fox News app. That's why it was hard for people to get. And somebody had to rip it. The link, I've got the link for it. Project Unity ripped it. So if you want to check out the interview, the link for it. The link for it is in the description below. So shout out to him. But yeah, I mean, I think this is the way people can understand each other better. Because I mean, look, I didn't know that Garry Nolan was homosexual. I didn't know that. And I know Tucker Carlson has not sort of said nice things about that community overall. And the fact that he can come to that table and have that conversation shows that he can talk to people he disagrees with. I just wish he would stop blocking people that he's never even interacted with. Because I think there's some good questions being asked of him from people that it shouldn't be that difficult to answer the questions of. I mean, but he doesn't owe us anything. He doesn't have to do that, right? Nobody owes us a thing. Not Nolan, not Elizondo, not anybody. Nobody owes us anything, So I understand that as well. But I just wish he would practice what he preaches a little bit when it comes to the bipartisanship of this discussion. That's it. What's up, brother?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's a weird dichotomy, right? There's the left versus right bipartisanship. Then there's the weird, skeptic versus believer kind of, internal of this community partisanship. Partisanship. That is kind of more partisan than, even the left versus right on this issue. And yeah, I agree. You know, I think that we're all looking, both the skeptics and the believers are looking for the same thing, right? And I think everyone would be through the roof if we found data or found evidence that suggested a non-human intelligence. I think that would be, popping champagnes for everyone.
Real quick, Jane, before we move on to the next thing, I am curious to know what you think. Do you same thing I asked rather? Do you think that Garry Nolan is privy to the same information that everyone here is too? You think he's coming to this conclusion that these things are real, that these are non-human entities, which is, look, that's been the basis of the show, right? The terra firma that we always refer to, like pilots have chased them. We know they're in the sky. They're there. What they are, we have no clue. But it seems he didn't actually say his whole theory, but it seems like he's leaning toward they've been here since, like, how do we know, like, this is our planet, even, like, that we're the most dominant thing here? Like, I believe he thinks it's coming from the ocean and space, and that it's non-human. Do you think the information that he based those things off of is the same information that all of us are privy to? Or do you think he's getting access to more stuff that we are to come to that conclusion?
Well, I don't think it takes top secret clearance to believe. I think we see plenty of people that believe, and I respect those people, and they write in and tell me about encounters they've had. So I don't think it takes a clearance to get there. I think I have bounced back and forth personally. I think I've become more skeptical lately, I guess, about like the leading evidence and narrative, but at my core, when you look at all the stars, it's like, I don't think it takes much, right? I didn't get an indication from the interview that there was some other evidence that he had some NDA signed for that he couldn't talk about, but I don't know if there's other, I didn't listen to the whole Lex Fridman interview, so I don't know if he's given that indication in other ones. But I think it's entirely possible CIA people visited him and showed him a bunch of information. Like, I would imagine he had to sign something and that I'm guessing he wouldn't be able to talk about all of that he was briefed on. That seems logical.
One word answer for both of you guys. Do you think his conviction will end up being validated? I won't even say right. Just, do you think his conviction will be validated? Yes or no, Jane?
Yeah, maybe in the short term. And that wasn't in one answer, but I just had to.
That's fine.
It wasn't one word.
Oh, man, I don't know. I hope so. I don't know if I can give a yes or no. I really, really can't.
Wow.
Yeah, I will say,
I mean, that's a loaded question.
It is. No, it is a loaded question. But I mean, we're just guessing here. It's a fun question. I'm not.
Yeah, my logic brain says no, but my emotional says yes. I really, really hope so, and I won't want it to be true. I do want, one thing that, he left with, which was, I was really positive impression of Garry Nolan. Is towards the end of the interview, he kind of explained some of his philosophy, and he was kind of talking about what he was trying to do. And he says that, he's trying to find a way to put, fringe sciences, stuff like that, into the mainstream science, and kind of like try to find a mechanism for how some of these outlandish sounding stories could potentially be true within our scientific framework. And I think that's kind of where he's coming from with the whole hologram UFO theory and the grays as kind of like an avatar theory. And I respect that. And I think that's awesome. That's kind of what I try to do on my channel rather than be Squidding, try to find ways to explain these crazy stories in scientific framework. So I applaud that effort.
Well, it sounds like the possibility of it. I won't say he believes in it, but I definitely think he believes in the possibility of this tech actually being achievable. And that's what interests him. And he wants to find the link between what seems to be unexplained to what might even be achievable by human hands at some point. The only way we started flying is when we started looking to the sky and saying, what it feels like to do what those birds do. I think he's so damn confident, man. He's like, I don't give a shit what you think. and he's so confident, and he's so infinitely smarter than I am, that I'm going to say I think he's going to be validated. I don't think he's wasting his time. I think he's going to definitively have a hand in showing the public that there's a there, and you better start paying attention to it, because science is. And anybody who wants to help us figure it out, we're giving out grants. You know, the government's giving out grants. So, I mean, he referenced the state of New Jersey just put out a grant to study UAPs, a state grant. It's coming, you know.
Could you imagine like the Breakfast Club or like some college movie, and it's like the UFO class, and like Mick West is like asking like snarky questions of the professor in the back.
Well, what's amazing is Diana Pasulka is doing sort of like classes, like in a term. I believe it's 10 classes, and I don't know what she charges for it, but I think the class is handpicked, which I'd be interested to see if, you know, any skeptical minds sort of make the cut. You know, but they, you know, they had Garry Nolan in there the other night, and you were able to ask questions of Garry Nolan, and they talk about, you know, they talk about the consciousness things side of things. They dive deep into the woo, the stuff that's difficult to understand, the stuff that's hard to quantify in a lab. Like, those are the things that they're talking about and they're theorizing in there, and it's their space where they're allowed to do it, and there's no resistance. It's just like, hey, any idea is a good idea, let's talk about it. And I don't think that hurts. I think that's, like Garry said, we're going to have to go to places like that to throw some ideas at the wall and see what sticks, because this could get, it's going to be weird. Again, like, whatever this turns out to be, it's going to be weird, and we're all going to be wrong on some level. But anyway, so any other thoughts, closing thoughts on that discussion before we move on? And like I said, guys, like, keep an eye on Carl Vibe, keep an eye on Chris Bartell in the next week. I think they're going to be going on the show tomorrow. So just keep an eye out for what they talk about there. We're going to be diving deep into it next week, as deep as
like
Mr. Bartell let
deep
us know.
underground.
What's that? Our show.
Like diving deep
Next
underground,
week.
like into like a mummy situation.
No. I think
that's what I want to talk to Carl Vibe about.
I don't know what I want. I don't know how much I can say, because I don't want to violate any sort of discussions that we've had. But after seeing this interview, after learning where some of that data was coming from, I asked some follow-up questions, and the response I got was, "You're asking the right questions."
Oh, cool.
And I don't want to get into it.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. I'm not trying to hype anything up, but I think next week's conversation with Chris Bartell, who spent years patrolling Skinwalker Ranch and worked for the Bigelow sort of era of Skinwalker Ranch, something's off. Something's not right here. And when you listen to Chris Bartell talk about it in Ryan Sprague's channel, there's some really interesting nuggets and things that he says in that interview, and stuff that we'll hopefully be able to poke a little bit more into. So homework for the crew here for sure. Go listen to that interview, because it's good. And stick around after the show. Maybe I'll tell you guys what's going on. Anyway, all right, let's move on to the next thing. So the next thing that I thought was really cool was the Lex Fridman, Lieutenant Ryan Graves interview. And rather, you had said something about going to the SCU conference, where I was like, really? That's what he thinks? And you said that you thought Ryan, or I'm paraphrasing here, this is not your exact words, but something along the lines of, yeah, I believe Ryan Graves thinks this is tech of some kind, right? Like, this is tech. What were your words?
I think he was very open to that possibility that it was a foreign adversary, and that seemed like his main concern was, the potentially being a foreign adversary.
I think he's just saying foreign adversary. There was something so interesting that he said in two separate parts of this interview, and I edited them together for you guys to listen to. So we're just going to dive right into it because I don't want to waste too much time. Let me pull it up again. Sorry, this takes a second, you guys, but it is what it is.
Did he also say something about the Wilson memo? I would miss that.
No, he didn't.
This
did
with
he? Did he say something about the Wilson memo?
No,
I don't think so.
I
No.
don't think so. I don't think so. But they definitely talked about the new bill and sort of what his take on what the new bill means. And it seems like everyone's on the same page that it was like, hey, get your stuff together, DOD. They're like, you need to be moving faster on this. And you know, he thinks it's a step in the right direction, but we'll see. But this is, to me, the most interesting thing that I picked up, and we'll talk about it as soon as the clip's over.
I was talking about this with a squadron mate earlier today about how, you know, I certainly wouldn't be talking with Lex today if I ended up going to test pilot school.
Why is that?
I never would have had the, I would have maybe recklessness, I don't know, but the willingness to have a conversation about UAP while I was, you know, that led me to the decision to get out once I went there. And it kind of enabled me to talk about UAP more publicly. And if I stayed in the Navy, then I don't think that would have happened. I wouldn't have been able to if I went that route.
Well, as a small tangent, do you hope to?
Real quick, I just wanted to stop there. I thought that was interesting. You know, like he gave up the Navy so he could talk about UAP. Also, I'm sure he also got a nice contracting gig also as soon as he got out of the Navy. But you know, but the idea that, you know, if he had stayed in the Navy, he wouldn't have been able to talk about it as openly as he does today, like at conferences, especially.
He mentioned that's why the gimbal pilot, the pilot whose voice you hear in the gimbal, who's one of Graves' buddies, that's why he's not speaking out, because he's still in the Navy.
He's still active. Yeah. He's still active, which is crazy to think that we're going to get there eventually. I have a feeling, especially I pray to God they get cushy jobs and they leave the Navy so they can come out and talk and join Graves. That's my hope. But yeah, I found that interesting. So I wanted to stop it there real quick. But here's where it gets, I think, more interesting. And the reason why, because he wanted to be an astronaut and he explains why he didn't become an astronaut. I think this is very interesting. So check it out.
To Mars one day? Do you think you'll step foot on Mars one day?
If you asked me that 5 years ago, I would have said, yes, I want to. In fact, I would like to die on Mars. Now I have some hesitations, and I have some hesitations because I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic. And I think that, we are truly like on the brink of a very wide technological revolution that's going to kind of move us how we used to move information and data in this last century. We're going to be manipulating and managing matter in that next century. And so I think our reach as humans are going to get a lot wider, a lot faster than people may realize, or at least.
Wait, are you getting like super ambitious beyond Mars? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean,
like Mars seems kind of boring. I want to go beyond that. Is that what do you mean the reach of humanity across all kinds of technologies, or do you mean literally across space?
Across space, So, we're going to be, I think that as artificial.
I have to pause it there. We have to talk about that, right? So just to set this up, the next clip that's coming in this conversation, and he mentions this about 45 minutes later, but the idea that he got out of the Navy and his ambition to stop going to Mars was, I think we're going to find tech that gets us past Mars in my lifetime. It sounds like.
I think was he talking about teleporting? Kind of seemed like a little bit.
No, I think he was talking about
they're going to be moving matter.
And this is with Michikaku. I know Simon Fly is going to clip this into a song. Michikaku said this also, this idea that we'll be able to type 1 civilization has the ability to manipulate and create matter at its will. Right? So you can have a machine, you type in football, boom, it gives you a football 3D printer essentially, but a much more advanced version.
Lou rather be squidding and type
right,
them out.
Right. But the implications to society would be insane if you just drop that into society today. Let's say we have the tech today, but you know, we just don't know how to put a governor on it so people don't hurt themselves. You know, like you can understand how a matter maker could, if that got into the wrong hands, how that could complicate a lot of things. So that's what he's saying, is that this idea of we're going to be coming upon tech real soon where we humans will have the ability to manipulate matter as if it's like information, like we do with the internet or what we do with information. What do you got, rather?
Well, yeah,
is that not what you took?
It is. It's unclear to me where he's drawing that from, if it is from his Navy experience and seeing these UAPs, or if it's from his career after the Navy, which is amazing.
Could it be both?
It could, yeah.
Could it be both?
Could. Sure. But you know, yeah, his career after the Navy is fascinating, right? He was, involved in, cutting edge AI research. Now he's doing this GenMat, which is a quantum computer material science company, and I'm right there with him. I think that they're if there's going to be breakthroughs in material science, Ryan Graves is on the forefront. And
he's on the
forefront.
Would know more than us.
Yeah,
he's on the and the fact that even Lex Fridman stopped him and he's like, "Wait a second. Specified, are you talking about PAS bars? Like, you think we could do better?" And he's like, yeah. Essentially, yes. I think, man, this really lends itself to, best pilot in the world sees something absolutely nuts in the sky, documents it. I mean, if you go through this interview, and we're not going to be able to play a whole bunch of it, but this interview is amazing because he really goes into details on the things that he saw out in the Atlantic Ocean. And a lot of those things sort of fit the description of the things he's working on. So this idea of like, oh my gosh, is that tech? Because he describes the admiral of the ship coming in and looking at the footage and getting 5 or 7 seconds into it, turning around and walking out. So his conclusion to that was, oh, he's seen these before.
Yeah, I've heard that story before, and it sounded like he was dismissive of it before. But yeah, that little extra antidote of he's seen it before rings true.
It rings true, and/or he just has the data of the testing. He knows exactly what he just came down there for show. Okay, yeah, got it. I know exactly what that is. I'm out of here, boys. I'm never talking about it again. And that is powerful in itself. Just an admiral showing up, looking at something that you guys think is fascinating and amazing, even to a point where an F-18 fighter pilot sneaks his way into the room just so he could see the reaction of this admiral. And everybody in the room is like, this is amazing. And he comes in and is just like, meh, turns around and walks away. Like, to me, that's more powerful than making fun of somebody for it. Because to me, that goes, okay, we're not talking about this. Nobody's talking about this. And as a matter of fact, issue's over. Right? Like, that was the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's amazing. I mean, I get hats off to Ryan Graves. I think if we were to choose a representative for the UFO community or for this issue, I think that Ryan Graves would be top villain. He's out there. He's willing to entertain some out there things, but he ties it back to real human concerns, and he's just I can't say high enough praise about him. I think that he handles it the whole issue in a really great way.
Brian Beck in the house.
Brian Beck doesn't
this
agree.
Is a terrible show. Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate
at least give us a super chat, right?
At least he's being honest, right? Yeah, whatever. Here's the thing, right? Like, let's play the rest of this clip because it's really good. Here, let's see how he ties this later on.
Machine learning start broaching further into the topic of science, or the area of science, and we start working through new physics. We start working through, or I should say, past the Einsteinian frameworks, as we kind of get a better idea of what space-time is or isn't. We may find answers that we didn't know that we were looking for, and we may have more opportunity. And I'm not saying this is something I'm betting the farm on, of course, but
of course not.
Maybe that's a road I want to explore on Earth instead of on Mars. Maybe there's technology that can be brought to bear with new science and harder engineering that is a road that doesn't go past Mars to get outside the solar system.
You beautifully put
that the thing that drew you to fighter jets is the technology. So if you were to imagine from an alien perspective, what kind of technologies would we first encounter as human beings if we were to meet another alien civilization in the next few centuries? What kind of thing would we see? So you're now at the cutting edge and you see the quick progress that was happening throughout the 20th century, that's happening now with greater degrees of autonomy, with robots and that kind of stuff. What do you think we will encounter?
I think we're going to see the ability to manipulate matter like we used to manipulate information. Like, I think that's what, whether that means being able to pop something on the table that didn't exist, or to influence a chemical reaction somewhere, but being able to manipulate and treat matter as if it was information. And so
Literally, that's what he's working on.
Mhm.
That's literally what he's working on.
find specific materials, being able to move past a lot of the barriers that seem to limit our progress with things such as miniaturized fusion, or even just fusion in general. Is, you know, a lot of it is matter based, is material based, and our ability to not manipulate. We can only discover materials in a sense. And so I think that a complete mastery of of physical reality would be one of the key traits of a very intelligent species.
Talking about alchemy, isn't he?
A little bit.
Yeah, kind of,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, alchemy led to chemistry, right? And led to some crazy breakthroughs.
Take something down to its quantum original state and restructure from there, kind of thing, I guess.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, like if you think about, you know, like string theory and stuff like that, where, you know, they say that the, you know, fundamental nature is just, you know, these elementary things and how they vibrate, right? If you can figure out how to then vibrate them in different ways, you can
Mhm.
literally create matter
Transmute
out of
it.
nothing. Yeah.
Change it.
I mean, man, I honestly, when I walked away from this conversation, I thought, again, and this is not just like my final answer on what I think everything is, but man, I walked away from that conversation going, oh, we figured something out. We have absolutely 100% figured something out, and he's working on it, and he's prepping us. And maybe they've even applied this to certain hardware, and that's what people are seeing. And lately anyway, that doesn't explain how we got to even dream up the technology. I think the phenomenon has a very underlying theme through this, as that's what they either harp back on as with knowledge, and they're like, well, damn, it displays this, so that means there's got to be a way to figure this out. And they back engineered, or they just figured it out on their own. And this whole thing is prepping everyone to, hey, you're going to start seeing really weird stuff in the sky. We don't know if it's us.
Well, and matter, what about dark matter, right? Because that's another buzzword, something that comes up a lot. And if they've learned to manipulate things, and, you know, I like to remind people, like, the big hole with the hole, and he talked about kind of undoing or getting around the Einstein, you know, like paradigm or whatever. And I like to remind people, you know, how, like, you know, we've talked about this before, but you have the professor, they have like the trampoline, right? And they're like, or the sun's in the middle, you know, and the earth, you know, goes around it. And it's like that whole model that we all grew up on is so, like, first of all, it's just, it can't be right, because it's like, well, what is under the freaking sun then? That's why is the sun not going up? Why does nobody ask these questions? Like, you know, in our classroom, we're missing like a huge portion of the universe, of the cosmos, right? Like, it's frustratingly asymmetrical. So this whole, or whatever, like, idea of gravity, like, we've figured it out, we really haven't. So but maybe we have, right? Like, maybe there's some findings with CERN, or some stuff with dark matter, right, which would potentially unlock a lot of probably other secrets of, you know, traveling through time, traveling through portals or wormholes, if you crack that, you know, what that trampoline is along, you know, and how to pass through it, you know, that you could figure out a lot.
Yeah,
Well said.
I agreed. And this
Oh
is
yeah,
hilarious.
that's true. That
Why is the
news
Earth spinning
story.
faster? This broke
Did you
today.
guys
Yeah,
see
like
that?
the
Yeah.
Earth is
Yeah.
spinning like
Yeah, that-
0.0008% faster. Well, okay. I don't know what the hell that means, but that can't be good, right?
Yeah, it doesn't.
And well, they said that it
seem
could throw
good.
off our whole like computer internet system, I guess.
Yeah, they're gonna do a negative leap second, so like stopping time for a second, essentially. And this might just be, you know, the molten core and like some weird stuff. Like, I think it could be prosaically explained, but it's interesting. Definitely interesting.
So I just thought I was getting older and it was just like brain fog, but it's just the the Earth is spinning faster.
Yeah, I again, like, I don't think, and it doesn't explain everybody's sightings, it doesn't explain everybody's experiences, but I think us figuring something out explains a good part of them. And then now we have to start asking and digging into, well, what are the other aspects of this, and how do they apply to this phenomenon, like this technology? I think the more we talk about this, the more we look at this, I'm 99.9999999% convinced part of this is us. It's just
part of it has
at least part of it has to be us, man.
Yeah, and kind of my core beliefs is, you know, I think that, you know, there probably are, you know, other intelligence here visiting us, but yeah, I've always been very skeptical that they're actually, you know, interacting with us in a meaningful way, or that, you know, the government has craft and bodies, that sort of stuff. But, you know, if we do figure some great leap of quantum computing, material science that does get us past, you know, Einsteinian equations, and we figure out how to travel light years and do so crazy stuff like that, then that would kind of suggest that other intelligences that are out there, which there's got to be other intelligences out there, probably someone has figured that out too, and maybe they are buzzing by us and interacting with us just in the very outskirts of our perception. So yeah, I think that it could really explain everything.
Well, I love Garry Nolan's analogy of, like, you know, when you buy your new house, do you go to the anthill in the backyard and confer with them before you buy the property, you know, or put, you know, cement over their mound because you want a swimming pool? No, like, you don't, you know? And so, like, maybe we are as insignificant as that. Man, I really want to talk to you, Garry. You know, I've apologized for what happened with Lou. I know Lou's your good friend. But I promise, man, like, we're not out here to intentionally hurt anyone. But man, we'd love to talk to you. And if we don't never get to talk to you, then it is what it is. But
I'm not blocked yet. Maybe I should try to.
I mean, I feel like it'd be a little sneaky if Jane got him on the show and then he shows up and he's like, "What the hell?" You know,
I get blocked.
Yeah, I think. Anyway, I really do think that. Yeah, don't be shocked if this is us, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Garry, you know, he's capable of answering tough questions, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I think that, come and you know, show us, make us eat crow, make us, you know, look like idiots.
I would love to look like an idiot in front of Garry Nolan. I feel like that's a definite, right? Like, I would like, please put us in our place, you know, make us understand and see the way you see it, so we can have that confidence that you clearly have. You know, I feel like I had that confidence, very similar to that confidence, and I've gotten a lot less confident, you know, in the last year. And but that doesn't change my belief of it, you know, or my experience of it. It just means that I question things a little harder, and I don't get too excited when things like this happen. I'd be patient. Let's see what other info comes out of this conversation, because I have a feeling there could be some foilable stuff as well that comes out of this conversation. I wonder if that picture, for example, can be traced in a FOIA request, where it came from, who did the study. Was it Department of Energy doing at Skinwalker Ranch? Was that a Bigelow, you know, what do they call those?
Contract or
no contract, but not a contract. I was gonna say like a crossover episode, like DOE and Skinwalker Ranch for 2 episodes arc series tonight on CBS. But yeah, I thought these 2 conversations were amazing, and they were a lot of fun to listen to. I've got links for both of them in the description below, so please go check out those discussions if you haven't heard them in full already. Highly recommend. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below. I read all the comments. I don't answer all of them. It's just impossible. But thank you guys. You guys have been killing it on the comments. We're almost at 13,000 subscribers too, which is crazy.
Whoa.
That's crazy. So thank you. Please help us get there. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. Okay, so there's a couple other things that we could talk about before we get out of here. We got about 10 minutes, 12 minutes. So there was, I really wanted to touch on this real quick. The director of Central Intelligence Agency, William J. Burns, in this clip tries to back down from a 6-year-old debunked claims of Havana Syndrome in an interview with NBC News correspondent Andrea Mitchell at the Aspen Security Forum on Wednesday, July 20th, 2022. So this was a couple weeks ago. I thought this was over the weekend. So just correct that there. So this happened a couple weeks ago, but this answer is interesting. And also keep in mind, like we had a 60-minute special where we had this gentleman on 60 Minutes telling us or inferring that the Russians are behind this or some other superpower, and that diplomats have been paid out, have been compensated for their effects of Havana Syndrome. And here he is a couple of weeks ago at this forum backing down from the Havana Syndrome claims. So let's check this out.
I want to ask you about something that has been going on for 6 years since the first known case, and that is what the government calls anomalous health incidents, and which is commonly known as the Havana Syndrome.
Oh.
So 6 years later, do we know anything more about what caused these illnesses?
I think we know more, but let me start at least the beginning of my tenure as director of CIA. I mean, I've learned over many years in public service that any leader has no more profound obligation than taking care of your people. So I was determined from the start to build on efforts that were ongoing, to make clear to our officers and their families that they were going to get the care that they needed and that they deserved. On my very first day on the job, I started meeting with officers who had been affected by these anomalous health incidents as well. And you can't meet with individuals who have suffered through this and not take very seriously what they've experienced, whatever the causes turn out to be. So I think we've made significant progress in ensuring people get the care that they need and deserve. We tripled the number of full-time personnel in our medical office that deals with this issue. We worked out very important relationships, not just with Walter Reed, but private medical systems to make sure people got that care. On the investigation side, over the course of the last year and a half, we've thrown some of our very best officers at this, working closely with partners across the U.S. intelligence community and the U.S. government. It's fair to say that we've learned a lot over that time. There's still more to learn. It's a frustrating process, but I have great confidence in the professionalism of the people who are carrying this out and in their commitment to objectivity. A few months ago, the intelligence community across the board made public some preliminary findings. The broadest was that we don't assess that a foreign player, whether the Russians or anyone else, is behind or is responsible for a sustained global campaign on the scale of what has been reported to harm US personnel with a weapon or some kind of external device. We further stated
So for 6 years, they told us it was Russia and China. And now they're saying, no, not Russia and China. And by the way, those families got paid out 6-figure incomes. And here we had for a week on Capitol Hill, Jon Stewart fighting for veterans' health care, for veterans who suffer from sitting in tar pits in Iraq and Afghanistan. fighting for their health care and for them to be taken care of, then these foreign diplomats get taken care of real quick, a lot quicker than they did. And it didn't seem like it had to go through Congress either. They got it taken care of pretty quickly. Or at least I didn't hear about that passing in Congress. I don't know if you guys did, but for 6 years they've been pushing this. It's Russia, you know. So if it's not Russia, it's not China. What the hell's going on?
I mean, I think it just points to how hard it is to categorize and like make sense of real life events, right? Like there's kind of the same discussion with like, you know, long COVID, right? You know, there's, you know, the people who have persistent long symptoms. There's been a lot of people who kind of suggest that a lot of illnesses historically have had those kind of long effects, but they're just now noticing them because, you know, the press is hyping it up. So people are kind of noticing stuff that they wouldn't notice otherwise. And, you know, maybe that's kind of what has happened with some with the Havana Syndrome is, you know, you tell people to watch out that there's, you know, these weird things that are, you know, beware. So any weird feeling you get, you suddenly kind of attribute to, you know, Havana Syndrome. So I think it's really hard to tease out what's real and what's not. And obviously the government's having a hard time doing that.
Yeah. Jane, any thoughts?
Well, I could see walking back different claims right now with just the way that the world is and the political climate, and maybe it's just incendiary to say things like that right now. There could be other, you know, it's interesting in Top Gun, which came up in the Graves interview. That was a fun little section, how the enemy is not defined in Top Gun. And I think that was like a really interesting decision making, you know, a decision on the writer's part. And maybe that's just all that's happening here. It's like, you know, we're not going to define, you know, our enemies to the, like another thing, and this is just off the UFO topic and not to get too political, but I remember, well, I won't give any specific examples, but whenever there's a big national news campaign where they're giving all the details about some, you know, national security effort or operation, I typically just like assume that we're not getting the actual story, and I'm okay with that. And I don't think that that's because it's this dark deceptive thing necessarily. I just feel like that's very illogical that you're going to go and just air out like your strategy and how you found the enemy, and like why would you share that? The only reason you would share that, because you certainly don't have to, right? It's not like the American, you know, people can really force you to share, you know, national security secrets. The only reason you would do that is because you want Russia and China and other foreign enemies to maybe get the wrong story or get some misinformation or disinformation. So I would guess that this man, and I mean this with all respect, I don't know, probably doesn't want to talk about what's actually going on here. Who knows? Golly, I mean, who knows if it's Russia or China or aliens? I have no doubt there's warfare like this that goes
Well,
on.
the thing is he told us it's not Russia, it's not China.
Yeah.
That's what he said, you know? So it just the reason why I wanted to play it is because I feel like now when we talk about Havana Syndrome, we have to take this into account. Like, oh, this might be.
But which case? Weren't there like many cases?
No, there
like,
were many cases, but they haven't released any of the data on it yet. But I mean, I'm curious to know if this is just something as simple as like a mass delusion or something like that. I have no idea. Like, I have no clue. But all I'm saying is that this idea that we could lean on Havana Syndrome as being a real thing, to me, this admission of, yeah, it's not a real thing, at least coming from Russia and China. And if that's the case, okay, that kind of leaves, what other options does that leave? You know, like, why are people getting sick? We could go around in circles about this all day. We don't have too much time. So I want to just quickly, before we get out of here, say thank you to a couple of the super chatters and some birthday love here. Thanks, you guys. Lord Ludacris Plaid with the $4.99 donation. Thank you so much. Happy birthday and great show. Jane, your conversation with Mick West was awesome. Looking forward to the Havana Syndrome talk. So I'm sorry we didn't have more time to talk about this because of course, like always, we always just run out of time on this show. But Skyhawk88 with a $20 donation and is a member. Thank you so much for being a member. Jimmy Church saw a beer can. Is there anyone who knows him that doesn't believe that he believes he saw a beer can? Huh. That's an interesting comment, Skyhawk88. Thank you for
it was
the
a
donation.
Coca-Cola.
It was, I mean, I believe if he says he saw a beer can, then why not? I mean, you know, I believe him on that.
Was there any beer in it?
Was there any beer in the can? That's the question. Tommy McAllister with a $20 donation. I think the big question still is, what is Congress being shown behind closed doors? There has to be something driving all this legislation. What is it? I agree with you.
I think that Ryan Graves, if you listen to the Ryan Graves, though, it's it could just be as simple as foreign adversaries and and near collisions and air safety, which I think is definitely
that's absolutely part of it. But I think he also I don't want to put words in his mouth again, paraphrasing, but he also hinted at, hey, this could also be not any of those conventional explanations, and we have to get to the bottom of it, and the only way we're going to do that is if we start having the discussion about it and we get legislation written, which is happening, and he's championing that legislation, and I think he was part of the reason why that legislation got written. I think he was in those classified briefings probably many years ago before any of this stuff came out, telling these lawmakers what he saw and what he experienced as a pilot.
For sure.
So anyway, we're not going to be able to get the sock puppets today. Oh, well, that's all right. I got the link for Bradley Johansson's article in the link below. Look it out. Just go take notes for accounts and just try to be careful what information comes out of it and how much you believe, how much you share it, because it turns out I don't think they're very, very, very honorable accounts. But that's that. Other than that, what do you guys got coming up this weekend? Anything fun, exciting?
Well, I'm trying to get back into the weekly posting. Kind of everything was on pause. So, and I'm looking into the old airships, and same question with modern day UFOs. Like, were they ours? Were they theirs? That's the question. So.
Rather, we got cooking.
I'm still kind of working on some underwater intelligence issues. I've been not finding the right answers that I've been looking for when I've been researching, so it's taking a little bit longer. But stay tuned over at Rather Be Squidding. I'll hope to have something posted soon.
Right on. Guys, I don't have a lot of time, but thank you to everyone in the chat. Thank you for all the birthday love. Thank you for all the donations. Thank you for joining our Patreon. You guys are absolutely amazing. It has just been wonderful. Another wonderful year here for me around the planet. So it's been fun to know you and get to know you, Jane and Rather, and all you guys out there in the UFO Twitterverse and in the chats and stuff. Real quick, we are looking for someone to help the show. We're looking for someone to help us do timestamps. I'm dying to put timestamps on all of our videos for you guys, but it's just something I just don't have the time for. So if anybody out there is absolutely in love with the show, DM me on Twitter or hit me up on my email, thebigphonehome@gmail.com. The home. We'll hopefully have the website updated, and we'll have a guest list and everybody that's coming. It's shaping up to be a really, really cool event. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully early next week, we'll have that for you guys. Other than that, have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe out there, you guys. Thank you so much for coming aboard, getting weird with us here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, commentary on everything UAP and UFO. My name is Luis Jimenez for Rather Be Squidding. Jane Kyle, check out their links in the description below. Love you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Peace. Thank you, Duncan. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.